Hello, I'm Chuck Wolf, Chief Executive for Charles J. Wolf Associates, LLC. As a motivational speaker and a leadership consultant and executive coach and trainer, I often work with very successful people in their companies. Since many can't afford a professional, I volunteer to host a radio talk show called The Emotion Roadmap, Take the Wheel and Control How You Feel, on a nonprofit community radio station in Bridgeport, Connecticut, WPKN. My reason for doing the show is to share with as many people as possible this wonderful process for helping people manage their own emotions and their relationships with others. My goal is for everyone listening to learn to use the Emotion Roadmap to make life better. As you listen to me, help others, I hope you are also learning. As a Simsbury resident, I'm delighted to be able to make the show available through Simsbury TV. To learn more, go to my website, www.emotionroadmap.com. Thank you for listening and watching.
Hi, this is Chuck Wolf, and you're listening to the Emotion Roadmap, Take the Wheel and Control How You Feel. And this is a show on WPKN 89.5 FM, listener-supported radio. Also, because of the advent of the Simsbury Community Television Station supporting our show, you can also see it on YouTube and on my YouTube channel. So I'm delighted today. I'm going to have a guest on. Michele Nevarez, who I've had the chance to get to know and to work with. Let me tell you a little bit about the show, and then I'll introduce Michele and talk about the Goldman EI Institute for Learning and for Coaching and how much fun it was to be a part of it at one point. So first, the show itself is devoted to listeners. All of you who are listening or watching on YouTube, I want you to know that we're really trying to provide as much help as we can to help you to cope with the challenges in life that are complicated by our emotions. We're always feeling something, but we're not thinking about them very often. Sort of like breathing. You don't really think about breathing unless it's labored breathing. Sometimes that's true about emotions too. We only think about emotions when we're really struggling with them. And so when our emotions are good and we're enjoying them, we're just feeling them. When we're uncertain, when life is complicated and we just don't know what to do, it's almost always, in my experience, because people are stuck because of the emotions going on inside them, or sometimes with the people that they're dealing with that are key to what they're trying to get done. Now, in this show, I often will have callers call in, and I'll try and help them with what I call my emotion roadmap. The whole idea of take the wheel and control how you feel is that we have much more power and influence over our own emotions and even over the emotions of others than most of us understand or realize. And so this show is about teaching you how to do that. And because of the interesting pandemic we've had the last 6 months or so here in the United States, we're struggling with getting into the studio. Many of us are not back at WPKN studios at this point. We're still doing remote shows. And as a result, I've done a number of interviews with really interesting, fascinating guests, one of which we are about to meet in a moment, and that's Michele Nevarez. Now, I know Michele because I've gotten to know Dan Goleman. So those of you who have listened to the show for a long time know that Dan Goldman is probably the premier author and speaker around the world in this field of emotional intelligence. Dan was famous for writing a book called Emotional Intelligence back in 1995. And in that book, he talked about a couple of the pioneering psychologists and scientists in emotional intelligence, Peter Salovey and Jack Mayer. Peter and Jack are two of the psychologists that I got to know and work with really closely over the years in helping them to promote their model of emotional intelligence. And over time, Dan and my path crossed, and I had a chance to interview Dan on my radio show. I was fascinated by his book, Focus, which I encourage all of you to read. It was a small book, but a powerful book, and one I thought really captured how important it is for all of us at times, particularly when we have something we want to get done that's critically important to us, how important the role of focus is for all of us. And Dan is a brilliant writer and has written about lots of different aspects of this field of emotional intelligence. And recently I got to know him better when I joined the Consortium for Research on Emotional Intelligence, where Dan and Carrie Chernus, another psychologist, got to create this consortium where they brought together top researchers around the world to talk about emotional intelligence. They invited some practitioners, and I got to be one of those practitioners. I'm sort of unique in the field in that I don't know any other of the people who are specializing in emotional intelligence who have their own radio shows. And so I've been doing this for about 11 years now. And on the consortium's website, you'll find that I've interviewed a number of people from the consortium who are top people in the field of emotional intelligence. Well, not too long ago, I saw Dan had created this coaching institute. idea about using emotional intelligence as a cornerstone and foundation for effective coaching. Now, I've been a leadership coach for a lot of years. And when I got introduced to this knowledge and science of emotional intelligence and how powerful it is, it became very much intertwined with everything that I've always done with coaching and became critical because, again, if you stop and think about times when people need to change, what is it that makes change sustainable? To me, it's not just changing what you think about. It's not just changing how you behave. It's changing how you feel. Because once your feelings change, your behaviors and your thoughts, those changes can become sustainable as opposed to something that's forced upon you. So as I found out Dan was doing this coaching institute, I became interested. I wonder if I could have some role in that. I love emotional intelligence. I've gotten to know Dan somewhat over the years and love the way he thinks and what he writes about and thinks about and talks about. And he introduced me to Michele, who is running this operation for him, was creating it and making a go of it. And we're going to be talking with Michele about that operation, her role in it. We're also going to talk a bit about the whole issue of pandemic in the sense of Dan's operation is a small business starting out, like many small businesses, that has been dramatically impacted by the pandemic, and like others, is trying to find ways to make it work. So we'll talk about that a bit as well. But mostly what I found with Michele, and I'll read her bio in a second, but I just found her to be just so enjoyable to talk with, such a pleasure to be around. And we had the chance to work together in Dan's Coaching Institute in Vienna, not too long ago, just a year ago. And it was an amazing experience, so much fun. And we can talk a bit about that as well. But let me introduce you now to Michele. Let me just read a little bit about her. Michele is the founder and creator of the Goldman EI suite of coaching and training programs. Michele's vision is to democratize emotional intelligence as a means of igniting personal and global agency. I also know Michele got to speak at the United Nations not too long ago. This driving force for Michele is at the core of how our programs translate emotional intelligence from theory to a powerful and practical vehicle for meaningful transformation and lasting habit change. Michele brings 25 plus years of executive leadership experience working for industry leaders in healthcare, investment management, management consulting, and manufacturing. A founding member of Rangjung Yeshi Institute based in Kathmandu, Nepal, Michele has practiced mindfulness-based training for 27 plus years. And if I pronounce that wrong, you can correct it for me. Michele received a BA in religion from Bryn Mawr College and a Master of Science degree in Positive Organizational Development and Change from the Weatherhead School of Management, Case Western Reserve University. And one of her professors, also a friend of mine, is Richard Boyatzis, who was recently interviewed for my show for his recent book on helping people change. So Michele is known to all these really top people in the field and has become one herself and is running this institute now. So Michele, would you like to add anything else to your background? And welcome to our show.
No, that was great. It's been quite a whirlwind over the last 4 years. Dan and myself and his son Hanuman and I came together in 2016. Actually started talking in 2015 about coming together for the purpose of bringing his life's work, his academic work into a space where people can apply and really take on board what does emotional intelligence look and feel like in life, and how do I start to practice it and develop those skills. And so we had kind of three aims, I'll say. One, you read it, but it's to democratize emotional intelligence. But what that means to us is that we make the concepts and the practices available across constituencies, across the globe, right? And not just to the upper echelons of leaders and leadership. So that was the vision, and 4+ years later, here we are.
So when you first started talking about it, what did you think the need was that was out there? Why another coaching program? And obviously Dan's name is powerful, is a powerful force in the world. I think if anybody knows anything about the idea or have ever heard the words emotional intelligence and they know something about it, they know that Dan Goldman's name resonates. But why coaching and why now?
Yeah, that's a great question. So initially, the thought had been to provide people with a viable path for habit change. And so in my experience, the 25 plus years heading up HR across industries, one of the things that I encountered again and again, and I still encounter to this day quite frequently, is the difference between somebody's declarative knowledge, or what is their intellectual or conceptual understanding of thing, and their procedural knowledge, that is their lived experience, their learn by doing, right? And how do we take on learning a thing, making sure it's a blend of the two? And what I saw is that most learning programs, including coaching programs, are geared much more towards the declarative side of the equation of learning a thing conceptually. And so, for one, that was a huge motivator to develop a way in which people could day by day interface with these concepts in short bites, short chunks, and apply it. So we came up with a model that we call Learn, Apply, Reflect. And I would say that it's definitely, let's just say, an adaptation of some pretty ancient wisdom coming out of the Nalanda tradition in India. But it's essentially this idea that we're trying to blend our conceptual with our application and then reflection. So that was one of the reasons. But then when we started thinking about, well, what is really the best way to learn emotional intelligence in real terms? How do you apply it? How do you develop it? And both Dan and I agreed that it really is, it happens more quickly through coaching. And it isn't that one can't take these practices and develop them on their own. They absolutely can. But we both agreed that through coaching, it vastly speeds up that process. And it allows spaces that you wouldn't experience otherwise to be experienced. And that's why we started with the coaching end of things. And
so having been part of the Vienna experience, where I got to come down and be a faculty member for the time I was there, people were just embracing and loving their experience there. After it was over, for the longest time in LinkedIn, people writing all these quotes about their experiences with this program, not just in Vienna, but how it was impacting them and their lives. And so the reflection was actually taking place online. They want to reinforce each other and support one another. And so people would offer queries and people would offer support. People would say what they were able to achieve and people would offer congratulations. But it was ongoing. I mean, sometimes you see that after any program that people like for a period of time, they'll say a couple of nice things. But this went on for quite some time.
The heart of our program was built from 2016 forward. And that's that Learn, Apply, Reflect model where people can go online, and not just as individuals, they can go there with a coach, or they can go there as a group, as a cohort. And that's where they see the quick video, the quick article that is talking about emotional intelligence, both with regard to the makeups of our brains, how do we apply these concepts? How do we approach them, and why should we care? And then they get an immediate assignment, like go practice noticing, for example, your mood shifts, or when you're triggered and what precedes, and how long do you stay triggered versus your ability to kind of be resilient and recover from a setback. And so, and then they would be invited to reflect. And that's the core of all of our offerings, is that online path, with the thought in mind that, when you go to an amazing program, or now these days you come to Zoom and you have a webinar, you have some content that you're taking in. It's so often the case that when we leave that, we may retain a few concepts, but we don't necessarily retain the rigor that that works really with the neuroplasticity of the brain, which is really just practicing at every naturally existing opportunity that we have. And so this framework is what is unique and different, not only about our coaching approach, but about all of our programs. It's the sort of underbelly, if you will, that threads everything together. And so that happened in 2016, and it took us a while to build that content, because it's 24 weeks. Each week has 5 to 6 days worth of Learn, Apply, Reflect. And so as you can imagine, it's a voluminous amount of information to curate, really. And so that happened within the auspices of Keystep Media, and that's Daniel Goleman's son's company. It's a publishing company run by Hanuman. And so that's where we started. And just a very small group of us, myself and a small team, came together to create the content with Dan. And then from there, that's when we decided to roll out the entire coaching certification program, really with the idea in mind that since coaching is one of the best ways to develop emotional intelligence, you're going to need a lot of coaches, and you're going to need to do it in a way that's scalable and more affordable. And so our thought was, let's start with training a group of like-minded individuals who are passionate either about coaching, about EI, or usually both, so that we could then have really the talent and the subject matter expertise in both disciplines to then be able to offer companies or individuals alike this content, this training.
So the idea of bringing people on board and trying to find a way to create a community of people that were passionate about emotional intelligence and then coaching, and also to justify the expense. I mean, well, it might be more affordable than maybe some other programs perhaps, but I know going to Vienna wasn't inexpensive. I know that the cost of a program and all the resources that are put into place to make this work, there's a lot of overhead that makes something seem seamless, right?
That's for sure.
And so there's a lot that goes into the upfront cost, and that's being part of the business side of things. And so it was interesting to me that you had a whole bunch of people sign up right away, it seems like. So you got, again, Dan's name in part, but also that you created substance. And one of the things that I found in my own work, and why I've done the radio show, this is now my 11th year doing this show, is that I realized over time that while, if like yourself, over the years I've been very closely aligned with the pioneers in emotional intelligence, and I've gotten to be part of the pioneering effort to create tools to help people to deal more effectively with emotions. One of the things that I realized was that you can talk about it as if it's simple, and you can explain it really clearly in a short amount of time, and yet it takes a long time and lots of practice. And I found over the years that people that listen to the show regularly are getting reinforcement each week when I'm able to talk to somebody who calls up and just says, "Hey, Chuck, I got something that I need some help with." And it's something at work, it's something at home, it's something in the community, it's something inside themselves, it's with another person. But as they're listening, and I'm trying to use this template that I've come up with about, what are you feeling? What would be more ideal to feel? How do you get from what you're feeling to what's more ideal? That the more I can reinforce examples time over time, that people get it, but it takes a long time. And even in my own work, I used to certify people on this tool called the Mesquite, Maya Salve Caruso Emotional Intelligence Test. We'd train people in 2 or 3 days. People would love the experience, they'd learn a lot, they'd go away and they wouldn't use it. And I thought, why aren't people using it? And I realized it's just because so much knowledge was contained in my own head. And at the time I was working with David Caruso, we both had so much knowledge that was easy for us because we'd been in depth, embedded in our brains, and we've been working with it a long time. And so we talked about it fluently, and so it sounded simple. But even my roadmap, which is 4 questions, there's an elegance to it, and it's really profound in terms of trying to grasp it and use it. And so what I found is if I do the Mesquite virtual training over 12 weeks, and I build the community like what you've done with what your cohorts are, where you build a team that people who don't know each other come to know each other in depth. And you have to obviously create some trust and some willingness to be open and share. But once that is established and people realize that this tool is not only for them to help others, but it can help them too, and they start working with it. And every time we get together, we start with, so how have you used the emotion roadmap this week or in the last couple of weeks? I have found there's so much more resonance and ability to grasp and use what they're learning when it's done over time. So I love the idea that yours goes on, I think it was, how many months actually are people involved?
Certification for coaches goes on for a full year, but the coaching engagements, which is what they're trained to work with clients on, lasts for 12 weeks. The students who've gone through the coaching certification program to become EI coaches in this model have a commitment of a full year, if not more. It kind of depends on how quickly they go through the practicum phase of their training. It's really robust. And then for the client, it's equally robust, but a more abbreviated period of time, because they're not so much learning how to become coaching experts, although one of the emotional intelligence competencies is coach and mentor. So they are, taking that in a bit in their own context. But the design really is to have that online component, coaching calls every other week with their coach. And then there's a journaling component, and that journaling component is in response to something we refer to as the 12 self-discoveries. And essentially what those are the areas where over time in working with clients, we've seen people get stuck. So they're kind of habits of mind that most of us encounter, if not at some point in our lives, probably daily. And we start to learn how to spot, with the help of a coach, what those are for us and where are we habitually getting stuck. And then in turn, how do we get unstuck when we notice, oh, there's that thing again that just cropped up. And so the journal prompts go throughout the 12 weeks as well. And in addition to the learn, apply, reflect, people are starting to unpack their thinking, their mindset or their mental outlook, as well as things that they're not as aware of, like their belief system and how that's coming into play with their results that they're getting in their lives. And so that's sort of the third element that makes the coaching program and our particular approach unique.
So with my roadmap, I've often tried to help people identify common paths that they enter that don't end well.
Yeah.
So when you go down this road and from experience that you're headed for a crash at some point, it's going to crash and burn. Is there some way that you can plan ahead of time once you recognize the theme? This comes from being a therapist years ago, at least for me. What I found was that when you recognize there are themes in your life where you get stuck, where you engage in behaviors that are inappropriate, but you can't seem to help yourself. Well, in a calm moment, when you're thinking about how to get healthy and whole, what about planning how you want to feel during those times instead of how you are feeling? Maybe you have a plan and it doesn't work when you first try it, but you keep working at it until you get something that does seem to make some sense to you, that seems reasonable and that does work. And then then when it pops up, instead of being caught off guard and out of control, you feel like, whoa, wait a minute. It's like when you're driving a car on ice. If you're in the Northeast and you're driving a car on ice, do you turn into the spin? Do you turn away from so it's kind of like learning how do you do things before you're in a crisis situation, so that when the crisis shows up, you're prepared. And what a difference it makes and how much more confidence people feel. So that's one of the things I think what you're talking about, at least that's how I see it, how it makes sense that if you can do that. And again, I think having that 3-month time frame allows people a chance to not just think about it, but actually act on it. And to your point about your model, conceive it, apply it, and then reflect and see if it's really working the way you want.
Exactly. And what we understand about how the brain works and the circuitry of the brain related to, for example, self-awareness, or what we term emotional balance, which contains not just sort of how we manage our emotions after we're triggered, but how easily are we triggered to begin with. And so we've integrated the practices that we know something about relative to the neuroscience research that's been done predominantly by Dr. Richie Davidson at University of Wisconsin. But they correspond brilliantly to what we think of as the foundational skills of EI. And so the importance of this is this. When we learn strategies for being able in that inflection point, as you say, when the rubber meets the road, proverbially or literally, that we say or do the thing that moves us in the direction of the other, or where we're not so prone to scratching that familiar itch that results in something we might regret because of something we said or did that wasn't so conducive to the relationship or the outcome. And so the idea with training the brain with these micro techniques of things like awareness of breath, or attentional training really is what it is. It's you're training the attention to come back, and so that you can selectively direct your attention, and you're training for something we think of as cognitive control, and that really is more aligned with this idea of being able to self-regulate, right? So it's being able, in a moment where you're triggered or hijacked, for the PFC to downregulate the amygdala and that kind of bidirectional relationship that the two have.
PFC, prefrontal cortex. Did I get that right?
Yes, you got it. And so that executive center of the brain that is kind of more the filter, which, gets sort of sidetracked or cut out of the loop when our amygdala is hijacked, right? And so that's when we would be more prone to saying or doing the thing that we'll later regret. And so these practices that are integrated throughout the 12 weeks that participants going through the coaching experience or the participants going through the coaching certification experience get to try their hand at and really try to work at moving the needle on how we can each take responsibility really for our own brains and for how we show up and moving the needle for ourselves in these areas.
The actual outcomes, I guess, as I'm thinking about them, are that people are emotionally and mentally healthier in one aspect as a result of going through this program, and that they're able to be more in touch with what someone else needs from them and how to respond more effectively to other people than maybe when they first come into the program. And so do you think of anything in particular that stands out for you in terms of what clients have said to you who have gone through the program that stands out for them?
Yeah, that's a great question, Chuck. So we hear all kinds of things. We have people going through just the online portion of the training who we hear amazing things from. And we have people who are getting coached and then people getting certified to coach others. And the common denominator that we hear from people time and again is that by going through this program, they're kind of learning what's under the hood. If we use the metaphor of our minds kind of being this black box or a cave, if you will, that we really don't, unless we in earnest try to understand what's happening between our ears, is like a cave. And so the experience of going through the program is a bit like turning a flashlight on in the cave. Suddenly, you know where you're at, you're able to navigate, and so you're able to see things that you didn't know before. And what's operative for me that may be causing me to, like we said, bump up against the same patterns of, either relational dysfunction or not being able to manage one's own reactions or emotions. So that's what we hear most, is that people are able to get a handle on those inflection points for themselves, and be able to at least notice, okay, I have an option here, a decision point. I've reached that decision point and can choose their own adventure, so to say, as opposed to just being caught up in the wave of emotions where we just kind of do and say the same things that we're accustomed to doing and saying all the time.
Well, that's a really interesting idea about, shining a flashlight in the dark recesses of what goes on inside. I flashed for a minute just thinking about, well, I wonder if Plato had a flashlight, if anything would have changed. But of course he had torches. But that metaphor really works for me. This whole idea of just, opening things up from, on the inside about this complexity of what we don't typically understand. I mean, you've heard me talk about, I in the way that I think about this after being in this field for a number of years, it's that when you see strange behaviors that people have, that really are not justifiable at all. You see somebody dressed up in a suit or in a nice set of clothes, and they're driving down the road and they're looking at their phone, or they're even actually texting to somebody while they're driving. And they look like a smart, informed person, you would say, in life, perhaps, just by appearances. And yet here's this really inappropriate and extremely dangerous behavior. What goes on? So, you look at that, or you look at people who overeat or overdrink or overwork or whatever it might be, and you say, those are all irrational behaviors. So if we talk to them about it, they'll say in a rational way, of course I know that's wrong. Well, then how come you're not changing it? Well, see, to me, it's like, if you're going to get real change, you've got to understand, what's the impulsivity driving somebody's need to text in that moment? What possible circumstance? I mean, it's possible that something horrible happened and you needed to see that text at that moment. Almost impossible that that's what's really happening. And yet we feel a compulsive need to open up our phones. And one of the things that strikes me about that is that, well, then you've got to find some other way to deal with that feeling that you're having. as opposed to this inappropriate behavior. So if you want really sustainable behavioral change, as opposed to somebody sees you and writes you a $300 ticket for driving that way and you feel stupid so you don't for a while, but then you go back to it. Unless somehow that feeling has changed. And how do you change feelings? How do you do that? How do you actually make that happen? And shining a light back there in some ways, it's like, what's going on inside? What am I feeling? And how is it driving what I'm thinking and making me behave in such a ridiculous way? So I think real sustainable change comes from understanding the feelings behind the thoughts and the behaviors, and then trying to either figure out, can I change the feeling? And if I can't, can I meet the feeling's needs some other way?
Yeah, that's very insightful. Just kind of pulling in Boyatzis's model of coaching, with compassion versus coaching with compliance, for example, is, I think, pretty apropos here. Your ticket would be the example of coaching for compliance, meaning
Right.
we have something that happens that's punitive, and so we're motivated temporarily, right, by wanting to get out of the heat, so to say. I use this analogy when I talk about habit change, right, and what really catalyzes habit change. But I like using this metaphor of a candle. Imagine I'm holding a candle and I have my other hand and I put it too close to the top of the candle. My immediate reaction is going to be, get away from the pain. And so
Right.
Often in life, we do get motivated to change because of a crucible moment, or our hand gets too close to the flame. You could imagine a variety of scenarios at work and home where that would be the case. But what often happens is that now imagine the candle in your hand isn't so close to the flame and you lift it up a little. Yeah, it may be a little uncomfortable, but we can get used to it. It's warmish. And so then that motivation, to your point, becomes something that has to be intentional. And often one of the reasons that we've kind of seen in our work why people don't connect the dots is because they're on autopilot. They have a set of habits or, needs, in this case, kind of that gratification of looking at one's phone, right? That immediate gratification or need for that. And that rules the day, as opposed to how can I consciously change my relationship to this thing that is, become what we call kind of a neural landmark, which is, when we, it's kind of like when you learn how to drive, especially a stick shift, it's all pretty complicated and it's pretty mechanical. And, we have to coordinate so many things, right? Same is true with our own emotions and how we're going to react when we get triggered. But the better we get at it and the more we practice, again, that taking every naturally existing opportunity to practice, training, our cognitive control, i.e. self-management, or training our attentional awareness, i.e. focus. That enables us that when we get to that point, to your point, we can then say, is this helpful, right? But we can blow past those inflection points if we're asleep at the wheel, so to say.
Where we don't get caught, we don't notice. And a lot of times we don't. We're on automatic pilot, if you will. And then we just continue to operate. So, and I love bringing up what Richard's actually have a conversation that's a tough conversation coming up in a couple of days. And it just reminded me that my conversation was going to start with compliance. and if I can turn it around and somehow make it about compassion, it's probably going to go better.
Probably, like even at a brain level, right? Kind of activating that parasympathetic nervous system versus, the other pieces that kind of close us in. And yeah.
Yeah, so that's helpful to hear that. For those of you who are interested in Richard's work, I actually did a podcast, and you can email me if you want, and I can send you a link to Richard talking about that, or buy his book, even better, helping people change. It's really a real well done story. I think it's hard sometimes. I mean, you think about coaching with compassion sounds, why wouldn't everybody do it? Because it's complicated and it takes a while, and sometimes you just want to tell somebody this is what you need to do if you want to survive or be a part of this team or whatever it is, and you just want to hold somebody accountable, and you don't feel like you got the time to be compassionate. And yet, if you want sustainable change, which is what I just started off talking about, if it comes from compassion, meaning that you ask somebody about who do they want to be, well, how do they want to be seen, how do they want to be experienced, and then you show them how the behavior is problematic that they're demonstrating that isn't that person. sometimes that's the way, a much better way, always a better way, if you will, to reach somebody to try and get sustainable change as opposed to compulsory change or compliance.
Yeah, that kind of feeds into appreciative inquiry, which while I was at Case, had the opportunity to study with David Cooperrider as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this ties in very much with the concepts behind appreciative inquiry. And in our coaching program, the way we kind of train and teach around these concepts of where a person could be at on various spectrums of coaching moves, let's just say, directive versus non-directive, or am I going to kind of point out the place where there's a delta between self-perception and reputation, or how a person is perceived by others, or how am I going to motivate myself relative to what I want to have happen, either a reminder of how what I'm doing keeps getting me the same results and has an impact, right? Versus what is that positive vision of what's possible. And so in our coaching program, we talk about use of the what we call coaching spectrums, and knowing we can be in different places on each of those spectrums relative to our clients' needs in that moment, and to have at least the facility and self-awareness, frankly, as a coach, to know where you're at, why are you there, and what's the impact on the client.
So as you're talking, I'm thinking that we want to cover about people I'm assuming people are listening and are wondering, so this sounds pretty interesting. How do I get involved? So can you talk a little bit about, who your typical client is, who what's the market for you, and how do people sign up, or how do they come to your program? I imagine it's different ways, but is there any sort of thematic approaches to getting involved with you? How does it work?
Yeah, we have the online training programs that people can sign up for, where they would join a cohort of people they don't know. That's one way to do it. And we find that people have great experiences when they go through that format, because they're brought together with people who care enough about the topic that they're there. They're spending their time there. They are amongst friends, so to say, of people who are wanting to at least move the needle on their own emotional intelligence. And so that kind of ability to connect, even though it's remote and everybody is across the globe in their different places, seeing the common experiences of what happens when you try to apply these things in your own life. So that's one way to
talk a little bit more about that, because I'm not sure it's clear. What does it mean to be an online component? Well, so you would sign up for 12 weeks, I guess it is, but is it a live instructor, or is it just something that is it tutorials and you just sign up for like YouTube videos that you watch, or is there somebody actually guiding you through experiences? Talk a little bit about that.
We have a platform partner, Torch Everwise, and basically it's a curation site. It's not really a learning management site, but it's a curation site. And so for us, what that looks like is that we're able to, for example, if somebody wants to delve deeply into what we call the essentials of emotional intelligence, or the foundational skills, they can do so. And so each day they would sign on to this online platform, and they would get the learn, apply, reflect, either a quick video, a short article, their application, and then the ability at the end of the day to go in and reflect. And they're in there with a group of people. And the group of people can see each other's comments, and even you can video yourself and share that video of, hey, I tried this and here's where it didn't go so well, or where it fell flat, or look, I'm going to have a difficult conversation coming up. Here's what I'm thinking. What am I missing, right? So you start to build this sense of community with the people who are going through the course at the same time. Okay. That's one way. And that's I would say, the version that is sort of most scalable and available both to individuals as well as within companies. So if a company wanted to, put any number of people through this habit, forming, changing, making aware of what one's existing habits are and shifting them, they could do it in that format. And they could also have it facilitated in that regard. We can have one of our certified coaches or instructors, faculty members guide the experience as well. And then we have sort of kind of a range, right, of broadest to most focused. So then we can have coaching in small groups led by one of our certified coaches, either in that context, right? Could be 4 to 6 individuals who are also working on the journal prompts that I described as well, or you can do the one-on-one. And so what we find is individuals can partake in any number of those things, and whereas companies will usually come to us with a specific issue or a specific goal in mind that they're trying to solve for within their broader context, and then that would be a very customized EI engagement where we might employ one or more or all of what I've just described, including not anymore in person, but again, at some point we'll be in person. For now is done through Zoom. So it's the full gamut.
So how do you choose? Do you have like a sales group that you can call in and you can kind of walk through what you're interested in and people will guide you?
Definitely. On the website, we outline, for individuals, here's what's available, and you can sign up for any number of the things I've just mentioned, individual coaching, the online with a group. And then if you're a business, you would contact us directly through the website. We have you fill out what you need to fill out, and then we would have one of our team members interface and understand just the way you would with any consulting firm, understand what's going on at a deeper level and come up with a customized type of offering.
I just want to make sure I get your website in there. It's Goleman, Dan's last name, GOLEMANEI.com.
You got it.
Okay. So that's how people can find out more about this. Okay. And you want to talk a little bit about how the pandemic has hit you and what's going on with that?
Sure. So our company launched, even though we've been working at this for the last 4 years, like I mentioned, Goldman EI launched last year around this time on October 10th. We had a formal launch at the World Economic Forum, coinciding with us speaking there, both Dan and myself and our faculty, around digital intelligence. Basically is a kind of an initiative funded by the World Economic Forum, and we're one of their partners. So we launched last October, and we, as you know, because we saw you in Vienna, we were conducting our second coaching cohort and at that time. And then we started a third one in January of this year, right, before the pandemic hit. Mm-hmm. And so we have all of this in play, and we had planned to have a fourth cohort in Ireland in the May timeframe, and then a fifth cohort in Thailand. Should have been now. But the pandemic happened and made it impossible for the physical travel. Mm-hmm. So we ended up canceling cohorts 4 and 5. And we had to conduct the second residency of our third cohort online versus in person. And so it's required having to apply emotional intelligence. And it's really been, a time of turbulence, both on a personal level. I told you I had surgery. I had, spinal surgery, which was I didn't plan for that. I don't know that anybody does, but anyway, so it's been a really turbulent time, both personally and professionally. And I have to say that I think that our mission of wanting to democratize EI for the benefit really of others has been a mission that has also allowed us to withstand the challenges of the pandemic, in so much as that there have been times when the core team that helped build everything we're doing, as well as people who have raised their hand along the way and said, hey, I want to be involved. We still have a core group that is so dedicated and wouldn't dream of leaving people who have started the programs empty-handed. So we have managed to get through this time and to do our best in an economic time that's very uncertain. So that's kind of how we're faring. And, we're anxious to kind of see, what happens. But in the meantime, we have a good model that allows people to continue doing this work, to continue accessing really what we're trying to make available to folks.
So the pandemic, will be going on for some time. We don't know for certain when we'll be anywhere near. Well, we don't know what the new normal looks like yet, and whether there will be a new normal or it just keeps changing. Right? It's evolving, obviously. So one of the things that you had talked about is you have some also personal ideas about assessments and books. You want to talk a little bit about, I said I'd make sure I'd give you a little bit of time to talk about those and what your thoughts are about that.
Yeah, one of the things that we've been trying to, I have these kind of phrases and mixed metaphors that I'm famous for, but crack the nut on, is this notion of how can people keep up with the momentum of the change they've set into motion. And so we've been exploring really since the beginning, what are some different ways that people can, go through our programs and understand their baseline. And so, as you know, we use the ESKI as a 360 tool, but not everybody.
Emotional and social competency inventory, so people know.
Thank you. I'm terrible with these acronyms, right? So, and that's great for people who want to, again, understand what is my self-perception and the delta between that and how I'm perceived or how I'm experienced and my reputation. And hopefully the smaller the delta, then, the less they feel misunderstood. And usually there's a greater agency with regard to what one puts out in the world and then the results that those achieve. But in real terms, not everybody has time to do a 360. And so we've tried to build in these different baseline measures. And so we're working at doing that, but we're also starting to offer some standalone trainings in the meantime. In fact, Dan and I kick off a training tomorrow, which you're cordially invited to. You should have an invite waiting for you. It's a 4-part webinar series with access to some of these online modules, 4 weeks of them anyway, for the duration of that time. And so that's one thing we're doing.
No,
starting this week.
That's how I signed up for that. You invited me. Okay. I
did.
Okay.
I did. I invited faculty and, the team to participate. So,
thank you.
And then we'll have some coaching offerings in the beginning of the year. So it's not the full coaching certification, which we're evaluating the timing of when we would want to relaunch it, because those in-person elements are so precious. Though we have ways we can, we've envisioned doing it without that if that ends up being the, continued norms or parameters under which we have to operate within. But we have a shorter program for ICF credit that we'll launch in the front end of the year, as well as we're starting to head into the Spanish-speaking market and offering that audience content. And so a group of our graduates are in the process of creating a shorter offering for the Spanish-speaking parts of the world. So that's what we're up to.
ICF, International Coaching Federation?
Yes, actually our program was accepted into that program or approved, which is a big deal. It took us years to get that to happen. So I think the key is, Chuck, we just have to hang in there. And given that this is my life's work and how I feel I can add some measure of value or kind of giving back what I feel I myself have had the benefit of receiving over my lifetime, then however it needs to look and feel, we'll be doing the work.
I think we're similar that way, Michele, because I also, one of the reasons I've been a volunteer for this radio talk show for 11 years now is my hope that if more people learn how to generate inner peace as a result of some of the efforts that you're doing, I'm doing, others are doing, that there's a better chance for world peace. I have these wild, high aspirations, and that if we just feel like we're in tune with ourselves and we don't feel angst and we don't feel agitated and we don't get irritated so easily and we manage what's going on inside ourselves more effectively, I think then the world's a better place for everyone. So we share that. I guess in closing, are there some thoughts that you'd like to share that might be helpful to anyone there's so much uncertainty today. And it seems to me, one of the things that the consortium of research and emotional intelligence organizations keeps coming back around and saying is how important this skill set of adaptability is. And this is before the pandemic. But boy, it sure hit big time. And that, we're struggling. I know that in the past, we've had ancestors that have struggled with far greater issues I mean, I was just reading a book about some of my ancestors that came over in steerage, that came over in the really late 1800s, early 1900s at the bottom of boats with no windows, with people sitting on top of them. And I mean, the things that we're struggling with seem like not nearly as significant, and yet we're not used to it. We just aren't used to the hardships, and just even if we're in good situations, we're still struggling emotionally. So, okay, we have any thoughts to share about what things people might be doing that might be helpful to them?
Sure, Chuck, absolutely. A couple thoughts, 3 thoughts, let's just say. We can get quite overwhelmed with what's going on around us in the world. In fact, I really limit my intake of news at this point. I'm very intentional when I do turn on the news and which outlets and things like that. But it's helpful when in a moment of feeling overwhelmed to one, bring the mind home, meaning if you can take a few deep breaths that naturally sort of activates something we call the vagus nerve and allows you to kind of center your parasympathetic nervous system, right? The PNS. And it allows you to become centered in a way that you're operating at your best and you're able to manage your reactions that you might otherwise be triggered by. And so in addition to sort of just breathing as a nice, ready, available tool for all of us, is thinking about what do I actually have influence over here in this situation? And it turns out that often we may not have influence or control over the things that arise, including our emotions, but in that next instance, we can say, how do I want to relate to this thing that just came up, either within myself or outside of myself or with someone else I know that's around me, and bring it back to what it is you actually have some capacity to influence. 1. 2, by doing that, you've cut out a lot of noise of what may be on your mind, but you have no control over anyway. And start to practice what I like to call keeping the mind and body together. So often we live in our minds and we walk around as if we just have our heads because we become so preoccupied with our thoughts, with what we're focused on, our conversations, and we completely forget we have a body. And so I like this practice of connecting the two back. And so one way to do that, there are all these apps now. I encourage you to kind of seek out the ones that resonate. But if you can find a good body scan practice, which if you're ever looking for a practice and can't find one, good bet is Center for Healthy Minds. It's the organization run by Richard Davidson, Dr. Richie Davidson out of Wisconsin. They have great practices that are free available online. And so if you can do a body scan, that helps you in many regards develop what we think of as self-awareness of the body and the emotions and how they manifest as bodily signals, which can act as kind of a radar system. It's sort of our body's GPS system, like, hey, storm's coming, set of conditions that are causing me to have my palms be sweaty or my face turn red. That's a signal. Hey, one of those inflection points is coming up and you have an opportunity, the possibility in that moment to say or do the right thing. And so by actually practicing these practices that can help you move the needle, that's a very productive thing to do when you're feeling very overwhelmed by the circumstances that are our lives right now. And then the third thing is, and you said it, adaptability. If we look at what is adaptability really, it's a term that we use to talk about agility, our ability to ebb and flow, work with ambiguous, work with uncertain circumstances, and change, the rapidity of change. But what that comes down to on a moment-to-moment basis is how we react to what happens, isn't it? It's how in that inflection point, each moment that we're presented with, okay, am I going to be triggered here? Am I going to say or do that thing? If you think about it, what it means to be adaptable is that you have some level of proficiency and that you're not going to be, when you're thrown off ground, you're not going to stay there for a day and a half and perseverate. But in fact, you're going to be able to get your head back in the game more quickly. That's what it means to be adaptable. So it comes down to these, I like to say, these smallest common denominators of what we actually have agency over in ourselves, like self-awareness, like where we place and hold our attention, right? Like how we respond when we're triggered.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Michele. We're gonna close now, and I want to just say how it's been a pleasure talking with you, as I suspected it would be. And you've been listening. Everybody that's listening, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for watching. If you're watching, this has been the WPKN 89.5 FM is the radio station. Simsbury Community Television is the TV station, and you're listening to Chuck Wolf at the Emotion Roadmap. Take the wheel and control how you feel. And my guest today has been Michele Nevarez, who is the Chief Executive for the Dan Goldman EI Institute for Coaching and Certification. And thank you so much, Michele, for being on here. And it's been a pleasure to work with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chuck. Thanks for having me.
Funding for Simsbury Community Television is provided in part by contributions from viewers like you. Thank you.